Welcome to Stepping into Shakespeare. We're here today with Matthew Brenher, who is the director and also played Orsino in our podcast. So welcome, Matthew.
Thank you.
Welcome, Matthew. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, so Matthew, how did you first get into acting?
Oh, what a question. I think just purely by chance. I'd seen a skit performed by some Royal Navy sailors, as you do. And they were just larking around on a stage, you know, wearing outfits, wigs, whatever it was.
Was this in England?
Yes, it was, yeah. It was actually in Cornwall. And I thought that looked like fun. And they looked like they were having fun and expressing themselves in quasi-macho ways and just larking around and so on. So I thought, oh, okay. And I'd had an interest, perhaps, to a limited degree of the stage. And but I felt there was some sort of creative energy within me that was unfulfilled, and I really wanted to, just explore it.
And have you done everything at school? When you were at school? Huh?
I didn't. I may have done a couple of classes, but I was not artistic. I was very much into sport. In fact, my youth was dominated by basketball and tennis and golf. It was really the only things that I sort of focused on outside of family and school time. I suppose I was quiet, the quiet beetle, and introverted, shy. So sport was the only outlet that I had. So it really didn't occur to me that to stand on a stage would be anything more than torture, probably, at that time.
Wow. And then what was the transition part where you actually liked it?
So I'm ex-military. I was in the Royal Navy for 4 years, and I decided to leave. And I was focusing on what I wanted to do once I'd left. And it was a long time ago, but, I needed a job. I needed to do something. And I just thought, having seen that skit, and there were a couple of other blokes who were also leaving and talking about what they were going to do, perhaps some modelling or something. And I thought that sounded quite, positive, something maybe that I could strive to do. But as I say, I always felt that I had this creative energy, this sort of, I don't know how you describe it, this sort of animal energy that, was omnipresent and needed expressing. I think it was just a case of, opening up and expressing myself. And
acting was the perfect outlet for this then?
I think it was, yeah. It certainly helped to bring me out of my shell. I mean, I was always interested in many things, but just not very good at communicating or expressing my feelings, you see.
And when did you come across to Shakespeare?
Yes, so when I left the Navy, I joined an amateur dramatic society, and I met a couple of people there who said, "Have you ever thought about drama school?" And I said, "Oh, God, no." And seemed like purgatory, going to a institution that would try and, break me down and so on. But but truthfully, I'd never considered it for a second. So, I mean, the amateur stuff I thought was a route in to acting, because we had a really good local drama group. And so I was doing musicals. I was doing Hans Christian Andersen and Kiss Me Kate, and I was cast in Fiddler on the Roof, And at that time, I'd been auditioning for drama school. I'd cobbled together a Shakespeare monologue and a modern speech, and I thought, I'll give it a go. I mean, I really had no expectations at all. And miraculously, I was accepted to a drama school as their sort of, I don't know how they defined it, but just sort of a late entry group who, I guess the term started in September and we actually started in the following January. So, and needless to say, we started to get into the the regime of movement and voice and dance, all the stuff that was completely alien to me. And eventually we came to Shakespeare. But by then I'd sort of met this chap who, in fact, who was teaching night classes at drama school, and I met him just by chance in the local pub. And, I think, he'd started a theatre company and they were doing Shakespeare. So he said, "Have you done any?" And I said, "No." I said, "I read it at school and it just baffled me. It was boring." Did
you have to do, just to interject, because we've talked about this in the past with Emmanuel, in England, we obviously had to do a play. Did you have to do a Shakespeare play at school?
Thankfully not.
Okay.
As I say, I was really sporty. That was my playground, my springboard for expression. So, of course, I saw plays at school and, whatever, but not wishing to sound cynical, but when you're, 14, 15, you really are not thinking about that kind of stuff. So...
I don't know if you're thinking at 14 or 15, right?
You're thinking of
about
other things, yes.
That's another podcast.
Hormones are raging. But just to, finish my point. I met somebody who mentored me and, timing, and that was fortuitous in the sense that...
Did you had an initial barrier towards Shakespeare?
Yes, I did. I mean,
I
did. We looked at Julius Caesar when I was at school. In fact, I pinched the text, the book. I still have it
from the library.
Well, from the class, and it was a hardback bound copy, beautifully preserved, with beautiful text and so on. And it was on, lovely print finish. Paper, whatever. Anyway. A souvenir. Yes. And so I still have that play. But, and I remember reading it and I just thought it's baffling. I don't know what they're talking about. And thankfully it came and went very quickly. So I didn't have to really concentrate on it. But, once I had met this mentor who really inspired me, I have to say. He was talking Shakespeare 24/7. It was reading scenes. I mean, we were reading Richard III, Lady Anne, brilliant scene. And I was really learning. I was a novice. I was, I felt like a fish out of water, completely out of my comfort zone. But it was broadening my imagination. It was stretching my intellect. It was inspiring me in a very unusual way, and which I think is the brilliance of Shakespeare. I mean, it's essentially just...
and it touches so many people.
I would hope. I mean, Shakespeare is as relevant today as he was 450 years ago. And
do you think at the beginning it was more the text that fascinated you, or it was more the characters and the diversity of the characters?
I think the stories. Just the stories were so inspiring, and of course the characters, and then of course you have to figure out the language, what the words mean, how they relate to the characters, and so on, how the characters relate. So I don't know what it was. As I say, I think it just touched on this kind of creative energy within me that needed to be expressed. And yes, Shakespeare is no doubt inspirational and to such an enormous degree. I mean, if you have if you can relate, and I think all he's talking about is the human condition.
Mm-hmm.
That's all it is. I mean, which is as relevant, as I say, 500 years ago as it is today. So, and that'll be the same in 500 years. So, yeah.
That's amazing. Now, you and I actually met. We met at Matthew organised a Shakespeare reading group at his house in LA. We read several plays, which was really great. But I also know that you've directed Shakespeare because you directed As You Like It.
Yes, I did. Over 20 years ago. In fact, in 2000, I did in a fringe venue. We were doing Henry V and As You Like It in repertoire, and I was in both and directed one of them, As You Like It, as you just mentioned. I don't know.
Was it the full plays?
It was both the plays. It was probably the greatest challenge.
And you did them like different nights? You were doing them back and
forth?
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Until the very last day, we did one in the afternoon and one in the evening.
Wow. So you did like 6 hours of Shakespeare per day?
Well, we did the final day we did, but we were doing 8 shows a week with maybe Monday off. We'd do, Tuesday to Sunday. Excuse me, perhaps throw in a matinee. We had...
Was that difficult as an actor to remember which play, like which lines? Because remembering one play lines is a lot, but 2 plays is quite a challenge.
No, I was younger then. My memory was more retentive. I don't think so. I don't recall it being a problem for me. I think that, as I say, the greatest challenge was actually coordinating 2 productions. And with the budget that we had and the number of actors that we had it was a real challenge. And then somebody would drop out because of work or whatever. And then we'd start from square one. So we need, somebody to do 3 or 4 roles. And so they became very challenging, I have to say.
Mm-hmm. But good training. I mean, you're juggling everything at once.
Yes. It was a great experience. I mean, I felt that we did justice to the plays in terms of we started with a concept and we developed that concept. And, of course, you're doing a tragedy, Henry V. You're doing a comedy, As You Like It. So there was a nice juxtaposition of story and characters and so on. Yeah.
So you worked with all these different plays of Shakespeare. Is there one which is close to your heart, which you feel is more...
Well, the first Shakespeare I ever did was Romeo and Juliet. I played Romeo, and in fact, I did it a couple of times after that too. And I think probably that play somehow more than any other.
Mm-hmm.
It is. I mean, it's not without its traps, but I think it was a great vehicle for me to begin to, be fresh out of drama school and to really focus on a part that was probably quite close to me. I was young and so on. And, it wasn't easy. I was still learning how to really relate as an actor, as a man, and trying to, figure out what this character was going through and all that stuff. So it was a challenge, yeah.
And to segue into Twelfth Night, obviously you have done like so much work for us, just in terms of cutting the play. You took it down from probably around 3 hours, I would say, to at least 2 hours for the podcast. And then we did the abridged performance, which was, I would say, 20 minutes. Can you talk a little bit about your experience doing that?
It's difficult to compare to any other. I mean, if I was to, as I say, compare to 20 years ago, it's a similar experience in that, you always know you have a time constraint and you're coordinating people and you're trying to understand the story fundamentally so that you hope that the concept that you're developing essentially tells the story and people will understand, and hopefully there'll be clarity and so on. And then obviously you want to just shorten it a bit because sometimes it can, it can sort of run on. So I think it's always good to try and cut if you can do it. Do it justice, of course, and not just do it because for the sake of it. So there was all that. So I was learning about the play, learning about the story, the characters, the verse, and all that stuff, and that was just all encompassing for me.
Yeah, definitely. And what about playing Orsino? Had you played Orsino before?
Yes, I have, yes.
Ah, there we go.
Yeah, I had the fortunate experience of playing Orsino in LA, I think probably 15 years ago, in fact.
Was that at Long Beach? Did you do?
No, it wasn't. It was Pasadena.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I remember it was in the open air. It was a beautiful venue and,
Nice.
it was, of course, it was very hot performing
Yes,
outside
I
at
was
that
just
time.
talking about the LA weather.
Yeah, we couldn't hover around any air conditioning or anything.
No, it's tricky, isn't
But
it?
no, it was, I don't remember too much about it. But I think what I have probably learned is, if you're going to take on the mantle of director and actor in a Shakespeare play, then I think, it does take some homework to sort of comprehensively understand what's going on and really to have your actors be able to also get a fundamental understanding of what's going on. You obviously have to know what you're saying and why you're saying it and to whom you're saying it. So if you have those three principles in place, then you will naturally, tell the story and with clarity and so on. So yeah, it's difficult because, Shakespeare is challenging. The academia of Shakespeare is challenging, trying to, what does that mean? There's so many words we've never heard before, words we've never spoken. There's so much that to really put under a microscope to get an understanding of. And if you don't, then I think then you're not, being true to the story in that way.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And I thought you brought quite a melancholy feel to Orsino. I noticed he was quite, he had almost a sort of poetic kind of feeling to him.
Yeah, he speaks some beautiful poetry, and he is a melancholic character in every respect, I think. Why? We don't know. He is who he is. He's self-indulgent. He's perhaps a depressive, melancholic, certainly.
So he shares that actually with Olivia. She's indulging in her grief.
Yes, I think there's definitely a correlation. He's not in grief, but he's in yearning for something that perhaps is not really what he wants, but he thinks he wants it, you see. So it's the idea of love, it's more of an infatuation, I think. And so why he indulges in that, we don't know for sure. We can only surmise that he's seen Olivia, of course, they're neighbors in the same town. She's beautiful. She's wealthy. She's quite a catch. It's totally understandable why he would be infatuated. But it takes Viola, actually, as Cesario, to, I think, make him realize what, in fact, he actually wants and needs. He needs that type of woman that Viola represents and not Olivia necessarily. Perhaps he's too close to Olivia in character and in status and so forth.
He needs like a complementary relationship rather than
I think he needs somebody that really enhances his life, who inspires him, and she does, undoubtedly. She is a great Shakespearian heroine. She's most certainly on a par with Rosalind and Beatrice and many others, undoubtedly. But I think that, how could he resist such a strong, inspirational woman that Viola is? And I think, as I say, I think she holds the mirror up to him and reflects back to him who he really is. And that all along, probably like all of us, we're looking for love. We want love and we want to love. And I think that's the same for him. So, yeah.
And I think from what I got from our scene when we did Theurillat and Orsino, when he's trying to say women can't love, they don't have the capacity to love, and she's throwing it back at him, and she's like, what? She basically wants to say, but she can't, and she's trying to tell him, hey, you've got the wrong idea here. But it's interesting how Shakespeare did that.
And he evolved through, as well, Olivia is really mean to him at one point. So then it's probably the turning point for him where he had to figure out where he wants to go.
Well, yeah, and I think, but I think then, he's no doubt become more and more attracted to Cesario, albeit who is masquerading as a boy. And I think when he sees Olivia in Act 5, I think, the bubble bursts. I think he realizes that, in fact, she's not the woman for him. And it takes Sebastian's entrance to, literally blow the lid off the whole story.
It's great.
And then Viola has to, reveal herself.
Yeah.
And she does. And it just kind of puts everything in perspective.
And it's a very rich play. It has all this theme of love and identity struggle, and everything is in there.
It's so omnipresent. It's so topical. I mean, Shakespeare was so far ahead of his time, and of course now in the world that we live in, everything that is all the themes of Twelfth Night are very much present around us today. And Shakespeare was so far ahead of his time. Yeah.
And we had a very interesting conversation just with George, who mentioned it was interesting how you need humor, and he was saying how they had fools. They paid for humor because they knew it was so important to their life. You both, Olivia and Orsino, pay for that humor because maybe naturally, you have a lot of money, but you're essentially both unhappy people.
Well, if you can imagine what it could have been like, 5 centuries ago, perhaps during the Italian Renaissance, when, every family apparently had a fool.
Wow,
and,
that's a lot of fools.
Or at least every.
It must have been fun at that time.
Yeah, every aristocrat.
Every evening instead of Netflix, it was joke time.
Exactly. That's
it was
no Instagram Reels.
Yeah.
No,
entertainment.
Yeah. Well, for sure, no. Only the aristocratic families, the wealthy upper class families would have. But yeah, it was their entertainment.
Yeah.
But also, the fool
was able to say the truth.
Could say the truth, and was a comfort, perhaps. And because of the truth, people want to hear the truth. Actually,
yeah. Do you think so?
I'm not sure.
I think it's the way to growth.
I think it is,
even if it's brutal.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I think, like Olivia says, there's no, in an allowed fool if you're allowed, but if it's.
But it's actually the fool who makes her realizing that her sadness or mourning
is ridiculous.
Is maybe has to come to an end.
Yes. Exactly.
So he made it in a good way. The humor way is maybe the most comfortable way we can accept the truth.
Yeah.
Because in an aggressive way, we all feel attacked.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So it's hearing the truth through humor is maybe the way we can accept it.
Interesting. And it's almost like therapy, right? Because if you're paying somebody and they're going to tell you something, you're like, okay, I'll listen to you. But if somebody in the street tells you, we're like, who's this person?
Yeah, I think there's a fine line, isn't there, between truth and perhaps non-truth, but
or the perception of the other.
The perception, and I think in Twelfth Night, it certainly is the perception of loss, and as one of the themes of the story, it's certainly, and in Orsino's case, the perception, the idea of love is not really real until, Viola.
Why do you think Orsino has got this weird idea of love that doesn't exist? Do you think he was just so cloistered in his responsibilities and duties that he wasn't able to kind of like just fall in love like regular people? Or
because he's human, that's why. I mean, there are no right or wrong answers. There's many questions. I mean, but we all know of this thing called love. We've perhaps all experienced it in varying degrees and forms. But I think in his case, maybe he's got responsibilities. He's obviously a very busy man, and perhaps he hasn't had time. I don't know. But
the workaholic.
Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and
or maybe it's also an idea to preserve something so beautiful,
right.
and in reality,
unrealistic.
love and relationship, they break down to something which is not always so beautiful than you imagine it.
It isn't.
And that pain, I don't know. So it was maybe a way for him to perceive it.
Well, I think, I mean, of course, there's always an underlying energy, perhaps a darker energy or something. We are sort of, there's shades of grey, black and white, whatever it is.
Yes.
But I think, that the energy, the power of love is it's undeniable, if you've been in love or whatever. It's very powerful. And I think maybe he's got to a point where he's ready. He thinks he's ready to settle, have a family, and she seems like a prime candidate. But
And after having read now with us the whole play, is there like a line or a sentence which is close to your heart or which you really like? Or you enjoyed reading it?
No, it's actually, to revisit the play was a privilege and a pleasure, because I'd forgotten how accessible it is and how topical it is and how relative it is, to how we exist today. And, it's, I don't think there is a line necessarily. I think there's some wonderful, poetry in the play from other characters, and I can't think of anything specifically off the top of my head, but I would urge anyone to read it, because I think it's...
and what would your advice be to, say, a beginning actor who was a bit nervous about taking on Shakespeare?
Well, I was that person at one time. I would say just be brave, risk failure. I mean, if there is such a thing, when you're trying to understand Shakespeare, even scholars and professors still are trying to fathom and analyze what it means. I mean, it's always evolving. It's always taking on different shapes, and I think it always will, because the stories, although they speak for themselves, they stand up as great masterpieces of, literature, frankly. Because the stories are so relatable of the human condition. I think that to a young actor, I would say just throw yourself in, have fun, enjoy.
Yes.
That's
it.
amazing. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Matthew. We loved working with you. And
you too.
I really enjoyed the whole hybrid process we had of the podcast and the performance. It was great.
Really, thank you a lot. And I learned a lot thanks to you. And you took your time to read through the text. And for me, it was a really, really important process. Thank you.
I'm glad. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.